All right, hello YouTube. Welcome back to the Messengers of Hermes show covering the Percy Jackson show. We're on episode 6, and I'm joined once again by Logan.
Hello.
And yeah, we're going to be talking episode 6. As you guys may or may not have seen, I did a live stream right after I watched the episode. So you might already know what my thoughts are on this episode. But I wanted to ask you, Logan, what were your thoughts on the episode?
I liked some, and I disliked even more.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. This is like the first episode where I've been like, yeah, this is just a bad episode. I can't even think of things I liked in this episode. Whereas like other episodes, it was either, you know, the villain was very compelling, or I could look at some of the shots were really well done, or the music was well done. This episode, I don't have really much to say positively. Like, I can't think of a moment when I was watching the episode where I was like, okay, that was really well done. Like, there was some comedy here or there that was, like, kind of funny, but I don't know. We're going to talk about it. I will say, this will not be as structured as before. I was having some technical issues when I was note-taking while watching the episode, so we're going to do a broad overview. But I want to ask you, Logan. So the first scene is basically this dream sequence that we see in the book. Now, it's done a little differently. It's mostly the same, except just visually it looks way different.
Yep.
So I wanted to hear your opinions on that first scene.
I'm gonna be honest. I was a little So I kind of liked the scene. The fact that it wasn't his typical, out on a beach and the hooded figures watching him. So it was a nice little change of pace. I mean, it would have been nice to stay with the hooded figure, maybe giving him some different dialogue. That's always nice. But to see his old headmaster from the school where he, I guess, met Grover and Charon, and Cryon, and just kind of that's where we start our story at. It was kind of weird to see his headmaster taking on the form of what
Don't
I
say
guess
it.
is the antagonist.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying. Antagonist.
Keep it secret.
Yeah, but I was kind of surprised by that because I was half paying attention, half not. It was earlier this morning, and I was super tired. And I looked at my phone after doing something else, and I was like, "What? Hold on a second. Why is the head?" I forgot he was the headmaster at first. I was like, "Who the hell is this guy?" So it kind of threw me off. But I thought it was kind of cool because he doesn't know who the antagonist is, so he took someone that he's not a big fan of. Would have been cooler to see Clarice, maybe. But I still like that part.
I'm going to be honest, okay? First of all, I didn't even remember it was the headmaster, but that is interesting. I did not like the scene at all. It didn't feel the same. Like, in the book, it's like, okay, it's a big menacing presence, okay? And it's, like, really, like, important to the story. And it's very much like a horror thing. And this just is, like, it just comes off very weird. It's just some dude behind a desk talking to someone that we don't know. It's like Until Dawn. The way, if you guys have played the game Until Dawn, it's kind of like that. It's like, oh, you don't know who this person's talking to and all that. And it's just weird the way it's done, because it's like the way the book ties into that scene with the rest of the book, it like all comes full circle and you get it. Here it's like, yes, it still does, because the voice stuff is the same. Like, the messages, the only thing that changes in this scene is just visually and the setting. But it's a very important, because it sets up the underworld like really well. This doesn't really do that. And then another part of it is, like, they actually cut a part of the scene off. So the next part of the scene, which isn't, I don't think, a huge deal, but it's also like world building going into the underworld, because that's where we're going next after this episode, is we get a shot of like Hades' throne. It's described pretty cool. And it would have been nice to have gotten that, but yeah, I mean, it's more or less the same, but just vastly different. And I think the way its tone came out. So yeah, that gets us through that. And I'm just going to say it now. So Percy wakes up and we're still in the back of the truck. I called it. I knew they were going to do some bullshit where they were like, hey, Clarice is the one that stole the lightning bolt. And that, oh yeah, Ares just covered for her. And, Logan, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the change, but I have my own opinions.
That part right there, I did not like whatsoever. I mean, They did it. I get it that it kind of helps along the lines of, oh, it can't be a god that touches another god's symbol, but they still don't talk about it in the show. And that I'm sorry, but
I
that
know.
pisses me off because it's like, well, why would Clarice out of all people do it then? Like, why would a demigod do it? I was like, it'd be a god wanting to do it, and if they can't do it, you need to specify that first.
Okay, so the other part of this that I just don't understand is given Clarice's personality, it makes sense from Percy, right? Percy doesn't really know Clarice. Percy just knows she's a bully. Grover and Annabeth have known Clarice for a long time, know the way she would act in all of these things.
That's right.
So
Yeah,
the
like they know
way,
she's mean,
yeah, the
but
way
she's not
you
half
would
bully
look at
like that.
Clarice, right? She's someone that's like confrontational. She doesn't seem like someone's very manipulative. She's just a prototypical bully, right?
Mhm.
And so then when you have this whole idea that Clarice is the person that stole it, which is going to require a lot of cunning and stealing from the gods, like, that's not, I can't buy the characters are that stupid. Like,
No.
I mean, again, the other part is like, okay, well, maybe Clarice did it because she's trying to get the approval of her father, which is interesting because, again, that's a really big storyline of book 2. So it's like, okay, maybe I could see that, but it's like, given what our characters know, it shouldn't be believable to them. There's a lot of things where I'm like, characters in this episode should know things and they should not know things. And this is one of those things where I'm like, they should know this doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, whatever. I mean, more or less, though, the point of this whole scene really is we get this message again going back to camp, which I'm glad that they did include this because it was something that I was questioning. Because this was supposed to happen, I believe, in episode 4 or it's right before episode 5. So it's like in between the end of episode 4 and right before episode 5. In that point is where this call basically happens and basically informing Luke of everything that happens and their suspicions. One thing I did find weird, since we're on the topic of Clarice being the person that Grover thinks it is interesting they left it as a big cliffhanger and then they actually didn't like follow up that scene. Like usually like when you do a cliffhanger, like you end an episode, you pick that up and you're like, oh wow, okay, this is who Grover is. Like you almost do it like you replay the scene at the beginning of the next episode.
Mm-hmm.
And they just like dropped it. So it's like if you're like watching the episodes back to back, you're like, oh, okay, wait. So who stole the lightning bolt?
It's just one of those cheesy scene chains. Like I don't.
Yeah.
This is very specific, and I don't know how many people pick up on it. But in the Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, during the Desolation of Smaug, the second one, when the mayor of the lake town, he's talking to the his assistant, and he's saying something in one room, and then he finishes the sentence. He goes like to the next word, and all of a sudden he's walking downstairs in a completely different outfit. It's like the amount of time that was just silent.
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
Well, one thing I actually want to bring into it, because I think when I was doing a live stream, one of the things that I thought was very interesting is the way this story is cut. The way I was talking about fading to black in the last like episodes is interesting, given that I didn't think about it this before, but the episodes do kind of seem like they're structured around like having an advertising break. Like if this was on just normal television or cable, and I'm someone again that doesn't pay for the Disney Plus, that like you don't get ads. So I maybe don't notice it as much because it's natural because of the advertisement, but when you like actually like think about it, it is interesting the way the episodes are structured given around when ads would be playing. I don't know if you've noticed that.
I have not, no.
But it is interesting like that. Maybe that's why they're fading to black, because if you're like fading to black and it's a TV show, if you're like on, I don't know, whatever it is, Disney Channel, you wouldn't notice that fade to black as much because you're going to an advertisement.
Yeah.
So that is just something interesting to just like think about, like why they did that. But
I did not think of that. And then kind of going back to the message back to camp, I will say I do like how they did it.
Yeah.
With the I forget what that thing is called, but the triangle crystal.
I know what you're talking about,
yeah. Yeah, I forget what it is. Don't get angry at me, people. But I did like that because in the books they normally needed mist to make the rainbow, but that was a new, different way to make it. I would have never thought of.
Yeah, I thought that was a good way they handled it. I thought that like outside of the Clarice stuff in that scene, I really enjoyed it. Just a little bit of a catch up, informing Camp Half-Blood what happened. I can't talk too much on it because there's other stuff going on, but yeah, it's a good scene. it's good to have the character of Luke back, because it's been, a while since we've had anything with him, since like episode 2, and I enjoyed the performance by the actor of that character.
Yep.
So that just kind of basically leads to they end up in Las Vegas, and we basically have like a very quickened version of what happens in the book, where it's like all these animals, they're basically trapped here. They were caught and they're being traded illegally and all this stuff. And Grover, wants to help break them out because he can understand animals and all that. So it happens very much the same. It's just the book, it's more of an extended scene. And so all these animals break out. I like that they give Grover some of his actual motivation, some of his personality in that part of the episode. Because I think that's important to understand, right? Because they haven't done that so far. Like, so far in this show, Grover's not really a character. And so anything even minor that we get of him, I think is good. But yeah, so we see basically, again, he uses some power to give them a blessing, similar to the book. We just don't actually see it happen in the show. So again, it just kind of feels like he's useless. But, so all this happens off screen. It's not exactly important. But at this, they spot the Lotus Hotel. Now, there's two different approaches that we see happen, right? Because I think something that's interesting is like the whole time that they're going to the Lotus, casino, hotel, whatever, it's because they actually want to go there. I kind of forgot that going into this episode, and I had to be reminded that, like, before they go into it, I was like, wait a second. I did forget, like, at the very end, there is this, like, very offhand line that's very forgettable. It's like, oh yeah, Hermes is there. He might be able to help you or whatever. And it's just like, very interesting. Because in the book, it's more like our group is very desperate. They're hungry. They don't have any money, all these, type of things. And so the Lotus is basically able to draw them in, use that temptation and all of that. Whereas in the show, they just went with, yeah, our crew is actively going there because they're seeking out Hermes to get transportation. So, Logan, I want to ask you, what do you think of the setup of the show, like, of getting to the Lotus Casino or Hotel?
Back to the point of this, I did like the animal part. I mean, it was just a quicker summed up version of the book, but that's okay because it wasn't a major plot anyways.
Agreed.
And we did get the stuff out of Grover, which was nice. And it for a what was it, 29 minutes of actual show.
Yep.
It was a good way to only take up a minute or two, but still give us what we needed. So I liked it.
Agreed. So, well, Logan, okay, so I want to ask you, like, what do you think about, like, the differences between, in the show, they're actively trying to get to the Lotus Hotel, like, actively trying to get in.
Okay, yeah.
Or versus, like, how the book, it's like, they basically get lured in. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, being an original book, well, I don't even know if that's the right thing to say. Reading the book first, I preferred it that way, to where they more or less kind of stumble upon it. I mean, that's where the truck with the animals was going anyways. That's where it was dropping off. I believe it was the zebra from the book.
I believe so,
And
yeah.
so they were going there, but it wasn't their plan to actually go to the hotel. It was just to get to Las Vegas.
Yeah.
But I mean, the show version is okay too. I mean, they have a reason to actually go to it, although I didn't like it. But
I see my issue with, because we did skip over something where it's like, this episode, I guess we'll just talk about it here. We'll talk about it probably more when we get to actually meeting Hermes. But we do, like, in the Luke message, Annabeth does some exposition on, like, Luke and Hermes don't get along and some of the background there. And I will say, like, before we get further in it, I find that very odd that it was in this first season, because, like, that is a huge plot line that's part of book 5 into understanding, like, some of the background.
That book 5?
Yeah, it's book 5. Like, book 5, Percy goes on a big, without getting into spoilers, he goes on this journey, and basically he's retracing the steps of the character of Luke. So everything that we're kind of, like, learning here is if it's in the first book, I don't remember, like, there much being anything about it really at all.
Oh,
because again, Hermes is not, like, at this part of the book at all. Like, he's not really part of this book. And so you don't get any of this. So we don't know any of this. So it's weird that I feel like major payoffs that I think hit home way more and are more interesting when they're at the end of the story than at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Just given it's so hard to talk about why I dislike this without talking about spoilers. So
Yeah.
I think book readers will understand where I'm coming from. Whereas if you've only watched the show, like you'll kind of understand it more as the season goes forward. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Also, I would
so
like to put in
go ahead, Logan.
cut me off before I say too much. I don't know how much will be too much, but they also did include, along with Luke and all that, they also included something very important, and that was the roles of seer or seers.
Yes, yeah,
And so that's something that also comes in later
yep.
books.
That's
I
yeah,
don't
that's a
remember
later
which
book thing.
one. That's a very big thing for later books that I was surprised they brought in so early.
It's a book
I think
4
that's
and 5 thing,
so
I
4. I
believe.
thought okay, I couldn't remember if it was 3 or 4, but yeah.
It's well, it's definitely if it's earlier, it's book 4, more or
Okay.
less. But yes. So yeah, they do I mean, it's just very interesting the way that they put things into this episode that I don't really feel like needed to be here. But that's the whole problem with like, and this is my thing, is like trying to like understand why they make certain decisions based upon budget or lack of time to do things, but then they introduce things like Hermes and this whole plot, and it's like I just don't think it's needed. Like for me personally, what happens in the book is they literally get a taxi to Santa Monica, and then they end up getting off track, whatever. It's a whole big ordeal, but basically they find transportation, and it's not made that big of a deal in the book as much as it is, I feel like, in the show. Because the show, they've gone this whole route where they can't get any type of transportation because of the police, which is like, okay, I mean, it's fair enough, but I don't really feel like it needed to add that, because now you run into problems of how do you now get the kids to the position they need to be at by a certain point of the story. And so that enters like the Hermes plot. And this is my issue with like the Hermes and the Lotus Casino plot, is it feels like just a massive plot device. It's just like, okay, how do we get them to have transportation? How do we get them to have Hermes's car by the end, and also to have the information of where is the underworld, right? There's two major pieces that they need. Transportation to get to Santa Monica, and then the other one is getting to the underworld, and where is it?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think what the writers did was they said, okay, we can do this by implementing Hermes. And I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, so I'm not going to get fully into there, but we'll talk about when we get to Hermes. But the Lotus like hotel, another thing I just did not like about its representation here is like as soon as they go in, they know what it is. It's just like, to me, it's like, what? Like we've completely just gone away from what the book was, where the book was like, yeah, they didn't know what they were really walking into. It all seemed too good to be true, but when you're so desperate and you haven't had any luxury, you've been on the run and all this stuff, and now you're getting food, you're getting, a bed to sleep on, you're getting all these things that are specifically targeted at you to lure you in because this hotel knows you would like them. It all felt like very mystical. It felt interesting. It's one of my favorite settings in the entire book series.
Yeah.
And then in here, it's just explained away. It's like, oh yeah, you just start forgetting things, and yeah, it's just like, oh, okay. And they already know it too.
Mm-hmm.
So like, Logan, do you agree with that, of what I said there? Or do you want to add anything to that?
Not really. I do agree. There's not much I can really add to it. It was very sad that the fact that it was like shredded away. It's like, wait a minute. I remember the lotus flower. That's something they use with this, this, and that. And it's like, really?
Yeah.
Just right off the bat, the whole plot of like,
Yep.
what was it? This chapter and then
Yep.
half? Like, man.
It just, it's
All,
similar to
that hard
like,
work.
it's similar to like Medusa, but the difference between Medusa and the Lotus Hotel is like, people know who Medusa is. Like, if you've never even read the Percy Jackson books, as soon as we got to that point, you knew who Medusa was.
Yep.
Lotus Hotel, people don't really know what the Lotus Hotel is if you don't like know this series really.
Yep.
So it's like you just took away all the mystical, all the interesting. It was doing the very bad thing of telling, not showing. Of just, oh yeah, let's exposition dump, and here's Grover again being his expositional self, and I'm just like, and it almost felt like what I found was interesting, because I talked about this a little bit on stream as well, is personally I liked the way the movie did this specific part of the story more than the show, because it's a little bit more accurate to the book. It's not good. It's not perfect or good either. It still has flaws, but I look at this and I go, okay, so given that knowledge, that this is basically a monster trap, more or less. Why is Hermes here? Like, why is Hermes basically just hanging out here when he knows it's like this bad place, but we're also supposed to have sympathy for Hermes? It just, it doesn't make sense as to why Hermes would be here, in my opinion. I don't know. And another thing I thought was interesting is that they, given that I think the movie did a better version of this like chapter of the story, I really felt like the whole, oh, don't eat any of the lotus stuff was basically a direct shot at the movie, which I found was quite interesting because that's basically the way the movie did it. The movie was, oh, you eat this little lotus flower cookie thing and, you know, you're hooked. The way you stop doing it is you stop eating it. I was like, okay.
It's kind of like drugs, more or less. Like you're hooked on it, and you don't want to stop. You want to stay.
So, yeah. And even just like the atmosphere wasn't great to me. It was just like, oh yeah, this is just some regular bar, like casino place. Like it wasn't anything special.
No, there's nothing special about it. And I'm gonna butt in real quick and
Go
say,
ahead.
for the non-reading viewers, this scene has to be very confusing because let me jump ahead a little, not say anything.
Go ahead.
But they see Hermes is there, and they're like, "Oh, this must be a good place. You know, that's good for them. It's gonna be safe. There's God there, or a God there." But then all of a sudden, it's like, "Oh, this is dangerous.
Yep.
This might be a monster trap." But if it's a monster trap, why is there a God? Like, it just makes no sense even
It
for
makes no sense.
Yeah, it makes no sense for anyone, book reader or non-book readers alike.
Unless you're trying to, the only thing I can think of as to why they would do that is if you're trying to make Hermes seem very unlikable. And that's not what they did in this episode. They tried to make Hermes like a little bit more understandable into his actions and such. And even by the end of the episode, he does end up helping them out. But so it doesn't make any sense logically because you're like, oh, okay, if this guy is actually somebody we should be sympathizing over, why is he sitting in a place that lures in satyrs, demigods, like anybody? Like, what?
They were trying to create the opposite of Ares, and they did it in like the most confusing way possible.
And again, that's why I think it's a plot device. I think on one hand, it was if we didn't get the Lotus Hotel, us book readers would be very upset, right? So at the same time, they were trying to do that, but then also filling in, okay, we don't know how we're going to get them to the underworld or Santa Monica, so we have to put in Hermes, which I don't think they needed to. I think you could have just had the Lotus Hotel sequence play out about the exact same, and then have them just be able to find a taxi and just not have it be a big deal.
Yep, and then to find out where the underworld is, they could have done what they did in the book when they found out the shipping address from Medusa.
Again, and if you wanted to skip that plot, right? You could have just like said, "Oh yeah, in the Lotus Hotel, they see a poster or something of how to get to the underworld." That simple. It's like it's not that unheard of because this is a place that traps demigods. Like they would be doing business with the underworld probably, or in some regard. So like, you can explain it away that's quickly, right? And then you eliminate all these other like plots or stuff, whatever. And so yeah, that again. Not a big fan of Hermes, but they decided to split up. And so this is something that I want to talk about here because it's a point that we get back into, and it's like the big overarching theme of being alone. And I want to talk about something because as me and Nickerson, we are book readers, so there's a future plot that this impacts. It changes. So Annabeth and Percy basically are not affected by the forgetting stuff spell or whatever because they are together. It's harder to forget because they're together. For book readers, you know there are two certain characters that are in this hotel right now. And they are, let's just say, a brother and a sister. And they are completely mind-fucked because of this place. So I'm going to be interested to see how they explain that away, given that Percy and Annabeth had no effects.
Yep.
So,
also, real quick fun fact about that. I found out on a little video, if you listen closely to, I forget which scene it was, but it was one of the scenes where you can see kids playing one of the VRs on the little like standing machines where you can run in place and whatnot. If you listen very closely, you can hear someone screaming a certain name.
Oh, can you? That's really cool.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I was like,
did not
wait
know
a
that.
minute. So I was listening to that little video. I was like, no way, that is so awesome.
Yeah, that's really sick.
So, book readers, please re-listen to that. See if you can hear what I heard.
But yeah. So I also want to like say something else about like kind of like the look of the Lotus Hotel. The Lotus Hotel is basically something that adapts to your interests, more or less. Right? So for Percy, he's someone that was very poor. He didn't get to go to many arcades and things like that. There's a specific line in the book where it's like a fun night out was they went to Burger King and they rented a movie. Like that was the status that they had, like in how rich or poor they were. So he didn't get all these things. So like for him, seeing a bunch of arcade games and there's this really elaborate like water slide that's really long in this place. Like Annabeth has this whole game where she can develop like a whole city and be architecture brainiac, like what she loves. There's another thing that's I think is really funny in the book where it's Grover basically gets to reverse the roles and he's shooting hunters because again, he doesn't like animals being killed. So it's really awesome the way it's described because it basically you put yourself in those shoes and be like, oh wow, there'd be this there and this there. And that's just completely gone. It's like, why would any kid want to be here? Like what does a kid want here? Like basically the gist of it is it's a bar with casino tables and such. It just is not anything like what we thought it should be or what it basically was in the book. But the two parties basically split up. Grover goes on this adventure, and again, what did we talk about in the last episode? Why do we keep splitting up Grover from our main party? Because now he gets basically no development. Or if he gets development, it goes nowhere. Like, Logan, do you agree with that? With the way like his development has been in the last basically the last two episodes?
Oh yeah, no, it's been more or less unhelpful, or just it stops in the middle of nowhere.
Like, think about where Grover's journey goes. It's like, yes, we introduce a little bit more on Pan, which is, again, for people that have not read the books, basically the central plot of Grover's entire character.
Yeah.
We get a little bit of a taste of that. And we get some interesting things, which is really a nice, that I liked, was like Grover doesn't feel like that he can trust his friends enough to like open up with them about maybe some of his concerns or his goals or his past. That's all very interesting. Except it goes nowhere. It's not paid off at all in this episode. Maybe it'll get fixed later on. It doesn't go anywhere. The Pan stuff doesn't go anywhere. He basically just becomes a burden to the other two members, like of Annabeth and Percy, the people that actually do things in this party, because he starts forgetting everything. It just randomly, magically happens because it's in the air or something. It's like what the Hobbit movies did with Mirkwood, where it's just like, oh, it's in the air, we're losing our minds. But I don't know. I mean, it just, that's all I have to say about Grover's entire plot until they come back up with Annabeth and Percy. So at this point, Annabeth and Percy, they make it to Hermes. We get a little bit more on the backstory of the character, why the gods treat their children the way they do, and overall how Hermes has been a father to Luke. And I know this was not a favorite part of yours, Logan, so I'll let you take the floor.
Okay, so the part I didn't really like about that whole interaction, well, first off, it's just not in the book, so that's just a personal preference there. But then it's just he was just so unnecessary, like because not only like we've been saying that he was in a bad place as a god, which shouldn't be the point for at least any ways the god he is, but then it's just like, oh, woe is me, my son doesn't care for me anymore because what happened, and it wasn't my fault.
Yeah.
So
It's
I'll move on to more, but I'll let you cover some of your opinions on that part first.
it just, again, I've pretty much said what I've wanted to say throughout this episode, but just to hammer it home, like Hermes is just unnecessary in this episode. It just felt like, oh, it's Hermes. We know who Hermes is. It's like, okay, he's not needed here. But the other tie-in, because it ties into one of the other parts I really hate about this episode, it ties into the end, right? They're trying to build this idea that like the gods are not interacting with their children, and that's going to affect Percy directly with Poseidon. And it falls so flat because it doesn't make any sense by the end. And I'll talk about it when we get to the end. So Logan, if you had anything else you want to talk about before we move on from Hermes, go ahead.
Just the conversation at the table, or the overall
Just
ordeal
overall,
with-
like, whatever characterization of Hermes or anything that happens along that plot line.
Just with the whole part of when they leave after talking to him, and I would like to say before they did that, he's just talking about his son Luke. He's
Yeah.
not talking about anyone else, and I get it. Annabeth was with Luke. She kind of understands what's going on. But what about the probably thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of kids he sired. Like, what
Yeah.
about all those? He doesn't have any remorse for them. He's just like, oh, my one son, Luke.
Yeah, I
Not
mean,
the other 20 cabin mates he has, our brothers and
yeah.
sisters. Just Luke. I feel so sorry for him.
It's actually quite funny because I'm pretty sure his cabin has the most people in it, not just because of
Yeah,
unclaimed people, but like also like his kids in general.
yeah, just he just has the most kids anyways. But
So, yeah.
moving on from that, Annabeth leaves the table, so then it's just Percy for a little. They get their little conversation out of the way, and then he goes, "I think you guys have spent enough time here." And then Percy walks away. And so I was like, okay, that's kind of weird, but I think I get what they're going with that. And so then Annabeth and Percy have their little conversation. She's like, oh, by the way, I stole the keys off Hermes. And I'm sitting there thinking, are you serious? You tried stealing the keys off the god of thieves? And I get they
Yep.
make that up later when he makes it obvious that he knew. But Annabeth, being one of the smartest kids, with the goddess of knowledge as her mother, didn't think of that beforehand.
To be
Come
fair, Athena
on.
is pretty dumb in this show to begin with, so
That's fair, but still, like,
yeah, it's dumb.
dude.
Even when
But
they like paid it off the end, or like towards the end, I was like, okay, this is still stupid.
yeah, no, it was still stupid because, okay, I can get, like, not remembering everything about gods and goddesses and what their thing is and isn't, but if you can remember the Lotus story, but not remember
Yep.
that Hermes is the god of thieves, when you hung around with one all the time, that's how they lived when they were
Yep.
running? Come
It's
on, dude.
sad.
That was just sad writing.
And the other part of this is just like, why did we need this to happen? Why didn't you just, okay, if you're gonna have like, oh yeah, Hermes can't like directly help them, but if they steal something from him, it's fine. Why don't
Yeah.
we just have it like, oh yeah, Hermes is one of those, it's very cliche, but it makes more logical sense than what happened is like, oh yeah, Hermes leaves the keys on his desk or the table
Yeah,
they're at. Like,
I would
and
have
just
been
walks
better.
away.
Yeah, it would have been better if he was like, "Oh, I gotta go do something very important. Something
Yeah.
just happened with the mail," because for him, it's spontaneous or instant, I should say. And so all of a sudden he leaves, he just disappears. Oh no, his keys,
Yeah.
they're on the chair or at the table. Shame.
Because it makes more sense. It's like you don't hurt any characters. It doesn't make any like it makes sense for Hermes' character, right? But it
Yeah.
also doesn't hurt Annabeth, make her look like an absolute idiot.
Idiot. No, that was
Which times she's
dumbest.
just an idiot, just in general, but more of an idiot. So yeah, this whole thing plays out, and we get to this point where it's like, oh yeah, we got to leave, but then they realize, wait a minute, they've been in here for like, I don't remember how many days they say exactly, but it's past the summer solstice already, which is another huge change because
hated
in
that
the
change.
book that means war has already started. Like there should be wars happening already. They're not preparing for war. We've already been preparing for war. So when we get this thing at the end where it's like, oh yeah, Poseidon couldn't come because he's preparing for war. I'm like, no. We should be at war already.
Listen, yeah, don't get me wrong, I would trust my son, but I wouldn't trust him that much. I would have been ready ahead of time. Come
If
on.
my son was a dumbass and was just sitting in this hotel for a while, I mean, it
Yeah.
seems like hope's lost here. Like,
Yeah, what took 5 days, and then, I mean, if I was Poseidon watching this, I'd be like, "Yeah, okay, you know what? Day 2, I got 3 more days. Imma go gather my armies real quick. I mean, it's not that hard. I'm a god. I can probably do just about anything."
yeah. And then, okay,
Exactly.
so then this, I think this is the stupidest. This is the stupidest part for me. Is they don't explain how the Lotus Hotel works with time at all. They just basically say, "Oh yeah, it's days have passed," and it's
It's been
like,
5 days.
what? In the book, it's like, okay, they've been enjoying themselves so much, and there's a little bit of that magic working on that they've lost track of time, more or less, right?
Yeah. They were taking a break from this hard quest, and it
Yeah.
was like a vacation. They were enjoying themselves. In the show, it's like, "Hey, let's have a 5-minute sit-down talk with Hermes," and by golly, Miss Molly, it's already 5 days later.
It
And they
makes
didn't
no
even know
sense.
that.
Makes no
Hermes had to make it
sense.
obvious to them. They didn't have the cool dude from the book that was from the '80s, I wanna say?
Yeah, it's the same in the movie. The movie, basically everything plays
Yeah.
out the same when it comes to Percy figuring it out, except Poseidon doesn't help him, like in the books, which is
Yep.
better. It's good. Poseidon shouldn't be helping him, but
No, yeah.
it's so dumb because it's like we've been told this whole time, right? Percy and Annabeth are not being affected by this. They're not starting to misremember stuff. They're not going all zombie brain.
Mm-hmm.
So how is it that just 5 days passed, or 4 days, or whatever? How did that just happen? It doesn't make any sense. There's no logical sense. Like, okay, Grover, it would make sense, right? He's a zombie now, basically. For this part of the episode, he's a zombie. You don't know what's going on. It's like, okay, fair enough, right? Maybe some time's passed there. But, like, the Annabeth and Percy storyline doesn't make any sense. It would have made more sense. This is the way they should have done it if they're still going to do the Hermes stuff. Is that Percy, Annabeth, and Grover, they get lured in, and we see, like, maybe, like, a montage where they're doing some games. They're doing the VR like Grover was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Hermes maybe find them. I still don't like it because I like it better that Percy figures out what's going on. But if you're going to have Hermes be here, have him be like, oh, yeah, you know, aren't you Percy Jackson or whatever? And then have that be the lead into the conversation. Then Hermes can reveal, yeah, you guys have been in here for 5 days.
Yeah. Aren't you supposed to be on that quest? You're a little late. It's already the summer solstice or something like that.
Something like that.
And
It's so simple. It's just simple writing like that.
Yep. And then another major thing with Hermes and this whole time thing is that Hermes wants to help because he misses his son. But then he lets him sit there for 5 days with him, knowing the effects of the Lotus Hotel. Huh. I was just like, okay, are they completely changing something in the plot now? Not only adding him in, but doing something else with him?
The motivations of characters in this episode just didn't work at all. Like,
no, it did not.
And it's so frustrating because if you look back at the last episode, me and Logan said, oh yeah, we're really excited going into these last 3 episodes. And then the roller coaster was basically going up. It was getting ready to, like, you know, come down, be the best part of the roller coaster. And then it just fell. The machine stopped working. Like, what happened? We just had a speed bump. And
you're climbing the top of the roller coaster. You're going there. The ka-chunk, ka-chunk, ka-chunk. You're slowly getting to the top. You're on the crest. You can see all around you. Ride breaks down.
Yep.
Well, shit. This sucks.
Yep. And then we get this. Go ahead, Logan, before I jump into the next thing.
I was going to say the one thing I did like about the Lotus Hotel, it kind of has to do with the shape. The shape was kind of like a flower. Looked more like an egg.
That's fair.
But it kind of looked like a flower. And I will say the way they kind of implemented the whole Lotus stuff taking effect, you know, they did end up finding out it was more or less through the air. Now, I did kind of like that just because they were more or less in a flower. And when you smell flowers, you smell a flower. As stupid as that sounds, it makes sense. So it's almost like the air within the building was just naturally producing that stuff because it was shaped like a lotus flower. I just thought that was kind of
would have liked it, Logan, if it made any logical sense.
If it made any sense. I just thought that was kind of cool. Like, you know, you go to a flower, you go to smell it. They're in the hotel. They smell.
Yeah.
They don't realize it, of course. I mean, they could have been like, man, this is a really nice fragrance in here. But, you know, they don't even bring anything up. I kind of like that. That's the one good thing.
I would have liked it more if it affected other characters the same way, like equally. It just doesn't.
Yes.
It just seems like some of the air is just not going to certain parts of this hotel, and it's just going to other parts real high.
Yep. No, that part I didn't like. It was kind of
the
nice,
idea,
but it did not save the episode at all.
So at this point, right, they're basically like, okay, we got to go grab Grover. It's a really kind of, it's a, you know, whatever. It just happens. They get Grover. They got to get out. Nobody stops them. Nothing like that. Nobody gives them a weird look. Nothing. They just go to the garage, go find Hermes' car, and Hermes leaves them a message basically with all the instructions of how to get to the underworld and blah, 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 blah. So again, plot device to get us to Santa Monica, and then later so they know where to go to the underworld. So the back, like, I think it's like 7 or 8 minutes. Or actually, sorry, before we get to that, this is the thing that frustrated me the most, is like, in like retrospective and just like looking at this scene where it's like Percy trying to drive a car. It makes sense. Percy wouldn't know how to drive a car, but did we really need, like, this felt like 3 to 4 minutes of screen time when I was watching it. It just felt like it went on forever. And it was like a Marvel joke that lasted way too long. And when we're saying like, oh yeah, this is where I'm invalidating now my own argument in the past episodes where it's like, oh yeah, they had just maybe haven't had time, and because of the 8 episodes, it's like, and then you see stuff like this and you're like, we're devoting 3 to 4 minutes to this. Like, what? Maybe it wasn't that long. Maybe I'm just misremembering because it just felt very long. But
it definitely felt like it. It was cute, but it was so unnecessarily long for it. They could have just done him hitting the bumper, hitting
yeah,
the front. That's it.
that's all
We
you had
get
to
it. He's a
do.
kid. He doesn't know how to drive. Moving on.
That's it. It didn't need to keep
It's
going
not.
because they had this whole situation where it's like, oh, okay, learning how to use the brake, learning how to use the gas. Then we're like, oh yeah, we're starting to go, and it's okay, it's another joke because they're going slow, and then he hits the side of the wall. It's like,
It just
I
took
don't
too
need all
long.
this. Like, why can't we
Mhm.
have any meaningful like dialogue between Grover and like Percy or Annabeth that
Mhm.
actually
And I
develops his character in any meaningful way?
No, they didn't do anything, and I am gonna kinda take over and jump to the next scene because I just kinda wanna bring this up.
Go ahead.
So he's driving, he doesn't know how to drive, so he's doing his best. So they get out of the parking lot, they almost get hit, not a big deal, of course, and then poof, they're somewhere new, and they don't know where they are, and then Annabeth goes, "Turn off the lights." And Percy is like, "Oh, oh yeah, I know exactly where that's at."
That
I
is
was just like,
interesting when
"Hey,
you think
hang on a
about
second.
it.
This dude's what is he, 12 or 13? I can't even remember how old he was supposed to be in this book,
He's
but it's
young.
just yeah, he's so much younger than he should be. When I started driving a car, I didn't know where the lights were. I had to learn that because it's different on every car too, so
Yeah.
not that that matters to this part, but how the hell did he know where the light switch was?
Let
He's
me
like, "Oh, yeah."
embarrass myself real quick.
Mhm.
I didn't know how to do the brights on my car until like a few years or like a year and a half ago. So put it that way.
I
That's
mean,
just
we
me
got
being a dumbass, but you know,
that's also these new smart cars, dude. They just get a little difficult sometimes, unnecessarily.
yeah, that is fair. But yeah, I don't know. And basically, we also get Percy. I don't remember if this happens before the car ride or after, or maybe during it. Oh no, it's before. So basically, when Percy and Annabeth are talking, so I do want to bring this up, but he does like say that he saw Hades talking to Clarice, which it makes sense why he would think it's Hades because that's the person I think stole it and all that.
Mhm.
And but I do find this interesting given that the reason that like Percy believes that in the book is more not because of the actual words being spoken, it's also the atmosphere. Like the scene is the underworld in this dream. So,
Yeah.
it's just it's a little different, but I just wanted to bring that up because I saw that in my notes. But let's kind of jump back to where we are, and they're basically at Santa Monica. They're at the beach and all this, and we come back to this very, very, very cheesy moment or they're like, oh, it's harder to forget when you're, with someone. And that's why Grover forgets in the Lotus Hotel. And it's like, what? What do you mean? The poison is in the air. What are we talking about here? And I already talked about the plot holes. We talked about it to death, but I hated the scene. I was so turned off of this episode by the time this even happened. And so we get this whole thing. So Percy goes into the water. And I talked about this on live stream because I was almost 100% sure that in the show, it was not said that Poseidon was going to meet Percy. It was made that he would get help, more or less, at the
Mhm.
Santa Monica. It was not made like that he was going to meet his father and have this conversation. And so Percy, just out of nowhere, it feels like in this episode, believed, oh yeah, he's going to see his father and all of that. And he's banking on that happening. And then that's why they introduced the whole thing of Hermes and Luke's dynamic, because Percy's not going to see his father here. And I was like, okay, this wasn't set up. At no point was this really set up. Like, yes, Percy has been getting closer to his father because his father saved him. And so Percy thinks that he has a closer, maybe, relationship with his father than he thought he did. But it's like, this really wasn't developed at any point. Outside of this episode, it wasn't developed at all.
No, all of a sudden he just thinks it's gonna be his dad, who has never seen him,
Yep.
and I mean, whenever he had a chance to, he didn't. And, the whole thing about the gods not really seeing their children to start, he knows about. He knows about that crap.
Yep.
But he's like, "Oh, yeah, my dad's gonna be there. Oh, boy."
And then this
And
whole sequence just goes down completely differently. Because they
mm,
make this change in the show where it's like the summer solstice has already happened, right? War is already brewing and all. It's already happening. It's like, okay, weird change, but okay, and
unnecessarily.
again, doesn't make any sense. It's just like, more just writing like, why are we changing things that don't need to be changed? So then basically this whole conversation where this water spirit or whatever is telling Percy basically a message that, oh yeah, it's not his fault, and that he should just go home to Camp Half-Blood and all this stuff. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Like, I literally like paused the episode when this started going, and I was like, what is going on? Right? This is nothing like what happens in the book. In the book, it's more like, okay, Percy gets this message that, you know, that Poseidon is proud of him, and that, you know, it's not his fault for anything that's going to happen or that has happened, specifically looking at like his mother and, you know, her disappearance or whatever, and gives him the pearls. It's also 3 in the book, not 4, which I'm assuming is going to be so they don't have to do a certain plot line.
Which also sucks.
Yes, even the movie got right somehow.
To a sense, yeah.
To a sense, it got it right. More like, I got the idea of it right.
Yeah, I got the
So
idea.
I'm just sitting here like, you're telling me that Poseidon, knowing the only way he avoids a war with Zeus, the reason that he claimed Poseidon or Percy in the first place, he's all of a sudden just like, yeah, just go home.
No, we're done. We're done. I
Like,
give up.
what? I just can't follow this writing because it's just all over the place to me.
Yeah, I get that he had till the summer solstice, and that if he didn't do it by then, that it was going to be the end of, it was just time for war.
Yeah.
And that's how the book goes. That's how the movie goes. That's how the show goes. That's the one thing they've constantly kept correct. But my biggest thing about this is Zeus is the god of the skies. Yeah.
Yep.
So he can see anything from above, correct?
Yep.
Or more or less.
Yep.
So you're telling me this whole time he's not watching the guy he thinks has the freaking lightning bolt, and like this the guy, watch this guy, see what he tries to do. I bet you he'll pull it out at one point to watch it or look at it, and you think he would never realize he doesn't have it? And he'd be like, okay, you know what? Maybe I'll wait just to see what happens now because I just want to know.
I mean, that's the whole big point, right? The specific reason Zeus doesn't just kill him right here and then is like, okay, it's a summer solstice. When the summer solstice is over, war happens, right? That's why it's imperative. It gives a lot of tension, and it gives a lot of, okay, the tension needs to build up. The plot needs to start happening very quickly. Like in the book, right, things start happening very rapidly because they have this date, this time. This series is very important when it comes to dates. And so now that we've just said, fuck that, like, it's just like the tension is almost completely depleted because now you're sitting here going, well, the war's already started.
It doesn't even matter anymore now.
What's the tension now? Like, what's the stakes? There is no stake. The war has already happened. Maybe you can say, oh, okay, well, he's going to prevent the war from actually breaking out. But it's like, why didn't we just do that the same way it is in the book? Why did we change it? It makes no sense.
No, it was an unnecessary change to me. I'm sure they're doing it for something they're going to have in the later episodes. I'm not looking forward to it. I'm going to be honest. We started out with last episode being with super high hopes for this episode. And I'm going to be honest, I could stop watching the show right now. I don't care how it goes anymore. I've almost lost complete interest in it.
I mean, and again, I don't know if I'm at that point. Like this episode, I judged very harshly. So I want to like complete the season. Or this is kind of how I view it, but I just don't. Why? They took all of this tension building to this moment, right? We have to get this thing back by this certain time, right? It adds a deadline, it adds stakes to the story. You then removed the stakes, and the reasoning for removing the stakes is almost the same reason as before, except now you've made it worse. The story just, it coherently almost doesn't function anymore. Like, you've just, I don't even know. And the saddest part about this is, like, I talked about this a little bit on stream, and I can't say this yet because I want to see how the rest of the season plays out. But it almost feels like Rick sold his soul to Disney. Like, I just don't understand how he made this world. He read it down and he did all these things. And then all of a sudden, because he's a major person when it comes to writing the show, all of a sudden, it's just all these things are vastly different that are not like minor changes to the story. They're massive changes. I don't know. I don't know how to view that. I don't know how to look at that and go, okay, yeah, this This adds up because it doesn't.
It doesn't at all. He made this beautiful world, and I mean, this has affected hundreds and thousands, if not millions of people. I mean, you and me and a bunch of people we
Oh
knew
yeah.
or know grew up on this. It was our obsessions as kids,
Yep.
and it was beautiful. I mean, he's made so many different series like this because of this one. It wasn't the original, but it was the best one he had.
Percy
And then
Jackson's
now,
the one that made him popular. Put him that
yes,
way. Put
Percy
it that way.
Jackson. Yeah, it was the one that made him famous. And then all of a sudden, Disney's making the movie about it, and he's I believe, the assistant producer, and he
Yes.
just kowtows over to them, and says, "Yeah, sure, whatever you want," acting like he has no vote, and he's just like somewhere in the background, just watching them make it, not even doing anything with it.
Yeah, it just seems like they basically took more or less like the points of the story, but then added their own things into what happens at that point of the story. Like for instance, if you look at the layout of the story, right? So the beginning, it's kind of hard to mess up. They did mess up a little bit of things, but it's pretty straightforward. They leave. They leave Camp Half-Blood. It's like, okay, they changed the Medusa stuff a little bit. I thought it was good. I think they executed it pretty decently. And then the episode 4 was again kind of around the same, but they added some other stuff into it, right? So this is where we start getting to that point where it's like, okay, it's the same atmosphere, same place, but just different things happen. And do those things work? That's what we've kind of talked about in all these episodes. Does the execution of those changes work? In some episodes they have, and in some episodes they have not. The last episode was pretty different, right? It was like, okay, yes, we still have going to the amusement park, and it's the Ares quest, but it's completely different on the quest. We have a completely different side quest with Grover. So it's completely different things that are being added into almost the hollow, like Percy Jackson story. That's the same thing in this episode. It's the exact same thing. And yeah, it's just frustrating. It's very frustrating to watch because this is the point of the story where we shouldn't be going down. We shouldn't be having more questions. Everything should already be built up. You shouldn't having to be doing these things that are plot devices that just come out of nowhere. And yeah, I just, again, Logan, do you have anything else you want to add for the end of this episode?
I mean, you pretty much covered it, and I'm going to say I like the actors and actresses. They do their jobs very good. I like how they play their characters. I can't be disappointed in Disney because I can't remember the last time Disney made an actual good thing.
Yep.
I will say I am very disappointed in Rick. I hate saying
agree.
that because I loved his stuff growing up, and I wouldn't say an idol, but he was a big deal in my life because of the books he made. And the movies weren't good. I still kind of like the movies, and they were based off of his stuff. I love anything having to do with Rick. I don't even know how to say his last name.
Rordan or Rord, yeah, that's probably right.
I like the stuff. I am just extremely disappointed. It hurts, honestly.
It's one of those things where it's like, I'm not willing to accept yet that it's completely sunk. I'm hoping they can turn it around in the last 2 episodes, but this one made it much harder to do. Put it that way.
It's going to take me a whole season plus of extremely good writing.
It's doomed for you.
Yeah, no. This season, I'm sorry, but I'm kind of done with it. I'm going to put it down to a 5 or a 4 now.
Okay, so our ratings are almost the same. I was going to give it a 5. I guess I'm just a little bit more like, I'm willing to allow some wiggle room for the next couple episodes, and you're just like, nah, this shit's bad.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. It's just the changes have been constant. Some of them, okay, you know what? You can just make some changes so it's not a copy for the book and has some twists and turns. I'm okay with that.
And some of those changes have been executed well. Like the Medusa stuff, I thought was handled really well.
It was good. The St. Louis and the mother of the monsters, that wasn't too bad.
Yeah, it was solid, except for the Athena stuff with the arch, with why they got in. But outside of that, the changes were solid.
That's why I didn't talk about that part. Yeah, no, the changes with the mother of the monsters, it was changed, but it wasn't in a bad way. I liked it. It was okay. But then this stuff, and then there's just the amount of unnecessary changes or unnecessary complications. It's just,
like,
it hurts. It's sad, man.
You can't say it's because of budget. You can't say it's because of the lack of episodes.
Disney.
I was making those excuses. I was making those excuses the last couple episodes because I was like, I could see it, right? I could see why they were cutting down some of these fight scenes and why they were cutting out certain things because it would be hard to animate, or not animate, but hard to CGI and all these things. But then I went to this episode, I was like, no, these are just writing changes that just don't make sense. Like, are they logical? Changing it back to the book version doesn't change anything really. Like, as in, like, what the budget would have to do. So, yeah, it's just disappointing. I mean...
It's disappointing. And I will never say it's because of budget reasons. It's Disney. They know how much people like fantasy and the fact that it's something we will never get to have, so we love watching it and we're obsessed with it because it's something we wish we did. So they could easily put as much as they wanted to into this. They have more than enough money in the world to do it. They just decided not to.
I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt because after Percy Jackson, because this is very, again, I think House of the Dragon, so the Game of Thrones, the show right after it, and Percy Jackson are very similar, and like, I do give them a little bit of leeway because you don't know how much interest there was going to be in Percy Jackson after the failed movie, and it has been such a long time since these books have come out. Like, again, these books were coming out when me and Logan were kids, and we're, 23 at this point. So, or Logan, you're 24, but, it's...
Call me old.
Well, I'm going to be 24 soon anyway, but still. It's one of those things where it's like, I give them a little bit of leeway. Like, you don't put the whole bag on this first season, see how it does. But I don't know. Because, again, House of the Dragon was the same with HBO, where it's like they didn't put a ton of it, and there was obvious changes because of that. But the difference is there was, for the most part, good writing in this show. And this show, it's been all over the place.
It's been all over. And, I mean, I get that. Like, they don't want to make any worse loss than they already have with their last... I don't even know how many movies.
Star Wars, not Marvel, huh?
Star Wars, Marvel, just Disney princess movies in general.
That's true.
Or just any of those types of movies.
Yeah, they've not been doing well.
They're having a rough time. But they could have easily done surveys across the U.S. or just even in their parks asking people just about Percy Jackson. Have you heard of it? Did you ever read it? If we were to make a show, what would you think about it? When they announced that it was coming out, the amount of people I bet responded saying, "Oh my God, I am so excited for this." I bet you those numbers were through the roof. Like, it's Disney. They have enough money. They could make it good. They could have gone all out on the CGI. I don't know how much CGI cost, but they could have gone all out on it like a movie. I mean, it's
this
more
is
or
your
less
biggest issue, though. You think that they give a shit. They want to make money. They don't.
I know that,
but they don't understand the correlation of if you make a good show and it has interest, people are gonna like it and spend more money on it. That's how you build it. Like,
no, I know.
So frustrating.
For someone or a company that's been around so long and has enough money just to do just about anything they want, buy anything they want, anyone they want, you think they'd have some financial advisors going, "Hey, if we actually put some decent money into this, the thing is going to make so much back."
Like, put it this way, this is why me and Logan are so frustrated, is because if you think about Harry Potter and how like important it is, how viewed it is, how beloved it is by everyone basically. Percy Jackson was that for our childhood, except we didn't have movies, we didn't have a show for it. Nope. It just was there. Like, even when I did a book review of both Percy Jackson and Harry Potter, both of them are very similar in structure, the way they're set up, the way like characters end up. Even you have a core trio, they're so similar that it's like this should be an obvious home run if you do this show correctly.
Yeah,
that's the frustrating part. Is that we both love this like medium, and then also you have it where it's like this has the potential to be something like great that everybody would talk about, but it's just not, because it's been very hit or miss and mediocre through most of the season.
It's a tried concept. It's worked before. Why isn't it working now?
Yep. Well, I mean, I don't know. That's a whole nother rabbit hole, but yeah.
Yeah, a whole nother thing we accidentally got into with this review.
that's Star Wars and Marvel discussion if you want to figure out why it went down the hill real quick. But thank you guys all for joining us. Let us know if we were a little too hard on the episode. We weren't, but you have your right to an opinion down in the comments. Let us know what you guys thought. If you agree with us, you don't agree with us, and we'll see you back for episode 7. Hopefully it does some good things and brings us back a little bit. I don't know about Logan. I think Logan's gone, but maybe it brings me back in a little bit.
I'll still review it, but they're gonna have to be some 12s out of 10 last 2 episodes for me to keep watching.
Logan's gonna be like, I'm gonna be like breaking down like, oh, I kind of like this. I was like, no. It's
I'm
bad.
breaking every little thing down now.
Yeah. Logan went from, oh yeah, you know what, I'm gonna give him, I like this, and then now it's like, nope, every single detail, it comes down to whether they know how to turn on the light or not. It's all getting criticized.
Yep.
These episodes are gonna start getting longer. This was only 29 minutes, and we went over an hour. So, well, actually, when I edit it down, it won't be an hour, but still, it'll be a lot. But yeah, thank you guys again. I'll see you in the next one.